Well, hello everyone. EU5 or Europa Universalis 5 has been officially announced, and I've been very generously provided with an early access build. To be clear, the build in question is very much a work in progress, but yep, that's what you're seeing in the background now. This video isn't sponsored, and this also means that Paradox Interactive or anyone involved does not have any control over what I say. In fact, they actually said criticism and concerns are welcome, so that's good to hear. Let's hope that's true, because if not, this video is going to get me blacklisted. But anyway, I'll be showing sped up, actual EU5 gameplay in the background, playing the Ottomans while I discuss the game in question. The background gameplay contains around a dozen hours of recording, so it's not all one session, hence there will also be cuts, as well as the fact that I did encounter crashes. Quite a few of those, more on those later, but it does mean that I did cut those out as well. Regarding the main video content, I will cover three sections: what I liked, the more neutral moments, and what I disliked. I've played a bunch of EU5 during my early access period, so at this point I'm somewhat familiar with what I'm going to be doing for my opening moves. Hence I'm going straight to where I want to be and clicking the buttons I want to click. I'll release a more in-depth EU5 opening moves guide kind of video later, where I talk about what I've learned and give you some tips that should hopefully remain relevant up to release. But with that all said, EU5 is announced. What do I think? Overall, yeah, I'm insanely positive right now overall. Is this a good game? Yes, there's your soundbite. I mean, I will be clear, if Paradox Interactive decides to declare a flagship title for their company, this is it. EU5 is a worthy flagship. It's currently a very leaky flagship. They need to finish building the flagship, but the flagship is in place, and what is here and is finished is genuinely very impressive, and I'm going to go out of my way to commendate. With that said though, let's get ourselves into the actual good stuff. And let's start with the big ones, the underlying systems. Roads are good, and if anything at the moment I would argue are too overpowered, but they are overpowered in the sense that they unlock the potential of your provinces and your nation. Buildings, well, the entire building system is also just good. No more fur trading centers in the middle of Siberia traded with the void printing ducats. Buildings need employees, they need market supplies as well as raw resources, and they actually, use tools and stuff to make things. And if you produce fur that no one is buying, well, you're not making money from it. Wars over market access actually make sense in the system too, which is great. Next, the food system. I hate it because I like it, if you know what I mean here. I'm trying to take Rome, stop pestering me out of famine I cause, but also, that's a good thing, right? I like the food system as a conceptual tool because food mattered a lot historically, and you can actually feel that in the game. Speaking of trade itself, it's like an actually good trade system, I'm not going to lie, which can be a bit more annoying in its current implementations, because if you don't click the automate trade buttons, you're generally going to have to micro it every other month tick. But beyond that, speaking of more positives, we have its society and management systems. Is good. Different cultures aren't just a press culture accept button and they're accepted. They play very differently, and integrating different cultures is a whole project for your nation to partake in. Religious tolerance and conversion isn't trivial. You don't just send missionaries or spend mana. It's a whole process again. Pops exist and development is present, so not inherently happy, but is both not that big of a modifier, but also something that scales insanely slowly and in an interesting way and can also go down, which means it's frankly the best implementation of an actual existing development mechanic I've seen, full stop. I complained about development recently in a video essay, so if you want to hear my thoughts on that, I will link the video. Otherwise, yeah, the EU5 development system is a good system. Speaking of other great systems, the society value system, where your society is just a bunch of sliders like traditionalism versus innovationisms, or centralization versus decentralization, or even communal versus individualistic attitudes like that, is just great. It makes the nation feel so much more alive, and a lot more customizable. I want this. I'm not going to share specific values given because first of all other people will, and also I'm going to expect them to change, so of course there's a meta already to some extent. The meta is an individualistic democracy that's centralized around a democratic government that holds absolute authority with a modern financial system on top of it. That's also very belligerent and not diplomatic, because being belligerent is very bad for your diplomacy, gives you 10% province war score cost, and yes, sorry, I'm stacking modifiers again. Speaking of modifier stacking, yeah, it's there. I know they said there wouldn't be any, there's modifier stacking. A lot harder to get to be honest, but it's there, and I think the hardness might be by the fact that I'm new to the game. What does help modify stacking is actually going to be the technology system, since mana is gone, and by the way, mana is gone, let's go. The tech system present is actually great. I love the tech system, and I want to go out of my way to say I love the tech system. It does mean that you now have a weird meta where you want to not tax the church and so on and so forth, because the church people, when they're happy, are able to invent guns faster. But beyond that, I do want to say it's a good system. Speaking of things invented in churches that aren't guns, the music is really good. Like, stop what I'm doing and just appreciate it good. They made this OST pop, it's new but familiar, and frankly not singing its praises would be intellectually dishonest. With that said, back to the other things that the priests are inventing, namely new forms of warfare. See, I like the fighting system. And ironically I will use it as a segue into the meh section, but with that said, Unit scaling is more real. Levies are actually a thing, and while levies do suck in battles compared to regular units, even nations that field regular armies are still going to be using levies because levies are unironically great at padding out numbers, which they were great at historically too, meaning you have more numbers to do things like siege, as well as providing boots on the ground as it were, in terms of area control. You still have 4 core units type, namely guy on a horse, guy with a cannon, and a new type of soldier, the supply wagon. Army scaling is also feeling a lot more natural, as new units are usually bigger in terms of the amount of unit counts, and the unit variety already present in the game is frankly insane, which I have to commend yet again. I will say I don't understand the combat system at the moment beyond terrain matters, you want more numbers, better generals, and higher quality, so take that with a healthy pinch of salt. But what I have to say is that what I've seen so far is very good. It's not the Victoria 3 combat system, I feel like I have to clarify. If I had to compare, it's an EU4 system at its core, with Crusader Kings Turn Victoria 3 characteristics in a good way, and no influences from Victoria 3 made it in. Ironically, I have a video planned where I plan to go into detailed specifications on how and why Victoria 3 combat fails so hard, so if that's something you're interested in, feel free to subscribe on down below so you don't miss it. But self-shitting aside, let's get into the mess section. The AI. Oh boy. Now the AI is marked as a known issue, hence its placement in the mech section, but at the moment the AI doesn't cheat when it comes to Fog of War, for example. This sounds great until you realize that humans kind of cheat in terms of their Fog of War, because if you attack a country that has 10,000 troops, and you don't see an enemy 10,000 troops anywhere, you don't go, huh, those 10,000 troops must not be real, let's march a 2k stack into a mountain fort. At which point the 10k stack that definitely doesn't exist pops out behind the mountain fort, outside of your Fog of War, and stabs you. If you happen to do that, and after seeing those 10k men, you'd probably go, oh, those 10k men are real. But the moment they walk away back out of your Fog of War, or more specifically the AI's Fog of War, they forget about that 10k men and they send another 2k stack into the mountains to siege it. The AI at the moment trivializes a lot of wars and challenge, and in fairness, if you're playing yourself without initially abusing the fact the AI is stupid and attacking in every single war, so the AI has vision on you, it's not that bad. But even in a difficult offensive war, if you just don't immediately attack the AI is going to go, huh, you don't have troops attacking me, that means you have no armies, I'm going to send small 2k stacks into your land and get them slaughtered piecemeal. And this is just one example of AI innovations. There's a lot. Or more specifically, the lack of AI innovations. It's a known system, but dear god, the AI needs a lot of work. But the AI isn't the only thing that's not finished. No, really, if you want to extend the flagship title analogy, this game is just about more functional at the moment than Leviathan on release. I'm assuming many will be fixed, but at the moment the UI needs some touch-ups, and that's saying it lightly. Temples all look Shinto, and again, the game just isn't finished. When I got access initially, there was even an issue with the UI, where if you zoomed out, all wasteland tiles looked like ocean tiles. They actually patched this live within the early access version while we were playing with it, but this was an optional fix, a fix I didn't install because flooding the Sahara was funny. Otherwise, you also have a mismatch of finished content, ranging from the likes of Japan, having flavor events that increase Bushido loyalty, but the issue is of course that the Bushido estate isn't actually added into the game yet, so you get an event that makes the Bushido happy in a nation where there's no Bushido to make happy. Florence, for example, also has an event spawn ruler, which is fine, but if they lose their event spawn ruler due to old age or him just tripping over a rock just dying, you end up in a permanent regency. Wars also just don't end, and the list of bugs so far is hilarious and worrying. For example, I'm able to import rice from the void, aka the rebel market. Lesser buttons of personal union subjects are able to declare war on themselves, meaning that rulers who are ruling 3 countries at once could end up in a situation where they're fighting themselves. And finally, of course, it's a paradox game with trade. So here's a screenshot of the game claiming I can make 2.5 times the money necessary for economic hegemony if that feature existed by importing silver from Naples. To be clear, I didn't make the money, but that doesn't stop the UI lying to me. I don't know if there's a release date in mind, but any release date pre-2026 is going to have me worried. Unless they invite the Stellaris dev team over, at which point the issues will be fixed within an hour, but there will also be twice as many new issues created, and by hour 2 of development the pop system will be reworked again. Moving on though, we have game timing. Hours are here, not just day ticks, which is great for battles, as they don't drag on to be 3 months long, but to a couple weeks at most, since each combat phase takes place during an hour. But this split of the days into hours slows the game down a lot. I'm going to use Civilization as an analogy, apologies if you haven't played the series, but game speed wise, if a Hoi4 campaign is a quick or online Civ game, then EU4 is more of a standard game, and EU4 campaigns are a marathon. The scope of the game is insane, but that also means that to experience it, you need to get hundreds of years into a campaign and a couple dozen, if not maybe 100 hours into one single campaign. just to see what the game has to offer. Paradox games are already not known for believing in spare time, and EU5 demands commitment to be enjoyed. At the same time though, I mark this off as a meh, because if you're willing to put the hours into the campaigns, EU5 also delivers. On the topic of delivery though, there are a couple systems that are new and hence cool because they're new, but in my opinion on reflection are quite meh. I don't know how to improve the antagonism system instead of the aggressive expansion system, but at the moment it's a glorified AE mechanic in my opinion with a fresh name and a couple more modifiers on top of it. I don't want to say do X to fix it, but yeah, I want to ideally see it get more work done before it releases. The same can be said for artists and the art system. I mean, it's neat, I can't fault it technically, but it can just be better. How? I don't know, but I would love to see it fiddled with more before release. At the same time, if it remains unchanged, it's not the end of the world. However, what I do feel needs more attention in terms of bringing up is that EU5, as mentioned earlier, is a marathon game, but it does mean that I would love to see non-1337 start dates. A 1454 or 1444 start date, something in the late 15th or early 16th century, and a late game 1700s start. And not the EU4 kind of start date, the forgotten scope of which, where you try and make every date playable and end up with none of them playable. No, I want 4 playable start dates just to approach this game, because I'm telling you one thing, I'm not playing a Native American to AFK for 150 years waiting for Spain to show up. And with that, we can segue into the bad. See, combat is good. Sieges are not. Despite this being a brand new game with enough reworks to make the Stellaris devs jealous, okay, that's the second time I've mentioned Stellaris, Sieges, however, remain very similar to EU4, if not practically identical to my understanding. The issue is compounded when you realize that the new 1337 start date means you don't get cannons for like the foreseeable future, meaning that gameplay boils down to very slow, boring sieges. Think Crusader Kings 3 sieges, but you're not allowed men-at-arms. In fact, no one's allowed men-at-arms. Which is made worse by the fact that forts are actually pretty cheap in the grand scheme of things. Yes, sieging a fort now gives you location control like Imperator in the newer titles, but that's less of an effect when by the 1400s every province is a fort. Thankfully, assaulting is pretty free once you get to around 30k stack sizes. But yeah, that's a hard negative from a gameplay point of view. I don't know if they have time to rework the forts. I guess I'll accept forts if they don't, but I don't like EU4 forts, and this is EU4 fort sieges. And it's made much worse by the fact that there's basically no buffs to sieges outside of spy networks for the first 100 years of gameplay. Like, this sucks. Next, we have performance. I'm going to assume that the large majority of my crashes will be ironed out by the time of release, but they're currently not. However, what I'm actually worried about is the actual performance, aka running, of the game. My computer is certainly not brand new, but it's not inherently bad either. I've got a 2080 graphics card that cannot handle this map on high graphics. Yes, a map game, knocking my visual settings down to medium. When I got my computer, I built it around a good CPU and RAM though, so 64GB of DDR5 as well as an Intel 10850 are usually good to this day, and I would say overkill for most applications. But in this game, even early game, we are seeing noticeable chug. It's mentioned as something that needs to be fixed, but like, this needs to be improved, and this isn't an option. And it gets worse when you consider loading times, because the loading times are already quite bad. Running just EU5 in my recording software, I was getting bored and getting my phone out to read comments and stuff while the game was loading. I thought my attention span was ruined, until I checked my recordings and saw that from game launch, as in when I double-clicked to fully loaded, EU5 in one case took 7 minutes and 34 seconds. This is not really acceptable, especially not on exactly potato hardware. I understand people with better computers will have an easier time, but even for those people, you're one Paradox update or innovation away from not being able to play the game either. Optimization needs to be fixed. And finally, I do feel bad for saying that in the negative section, but the game is complex. It has not been simplified for the modding audience, as it were, but this also means that it took me around 4 to 5 hours to get my bearings before unpausing in my first game. And I just loaded in as England, because England is a nation I famously never play. And bear in mind, I'm not the average PDX gamer, at least I hope not, because excluding the whole YouTube videos things, I've got well over, well actually let's check, I have 4,688 hours on Steam in EU4, and I believe near to 10,000 in the strategy genre overall. Furthermore, I read all the Tinto talks, which means this game absolutely needs a tutorial if I still need 4 hours before I unpause. Which it has, in the form of a tutorial button that says not implemented. This isn't a feature request, more like a plea for, yeah look, you need this. The potential of the game remains insane, but it just needs to be more approachable beyond, oh, you like Conquest, play Castile and go kill Andalusia, which by the way is currently the full extent of the tutorial button if I say I like war. They need to get that right, and the fact that they themselves recognize does fill me with some hope, but it remains as a point nonetheless. With that all said, that is going to be all the time I have for you today. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask in the comments section or anywhere else. I will try to respond to as many as I can, but as always, bear in mind that some things are subject to change, some things I'm not allowed to tell you, and also I could tell you things that are wrong. So don't take anything I say as gospel. Trust Paradox correspondence over me because, again, I'm answering to the best of my ability. But anyway, thank you very much for watching, with a special thank you to my channel members, especially Ark, Solar, W Haste, Celeven, Star72, Lord Zendikar, Nick Fassbender, Nanhatan, Nick Huss, The Awesome Rabbit, Best Pro Gaming, Grambil Flavia, Conno, Andrew Sauberg, Decky, Sol, Mobkiller, Anthony35, AC Napo, Glorious Leader, Zerkis, Mr. Goomshock, Yukata, and Danry. Oh, and EU5 Ambernaut is going to be insane.